YouTube has seen its fair share of controversial creators over the years. Some names have become almost legendary, not because of their success, but because of the scandals that followed them. One of those names is Logan Paul. Back in 2017, Logan uploaded a video filmed inside Japan's Aokigahara forest, a place known around the world for being associated with death. In that video, Logan and his friends discovered the body of a man who unalived himself. Instead of immediately ending the recording, parts of the footage remained in the video that was later uploaded for millions of people to see. However, Logan Paul was far from the only creator whose career was shaken by controversy. Another name that constantly appears in conversations about YouTube scandals is Shane Dawson. For many years, Shane Dawson was considered one of the original kings of YouTube. However, as his popularity grew, so did old clips from earlier videos of him that included racist characters, extremely inappropriate jokes, and comments that many viewers found deeply disturbing. Stories like these are already shocking on their own, and they show just how quickly internet fame can collapse when a creator crosses the wrong line. But even these controversies, as messy and damaging as they were, still feel almost simple compared to the story we are about to explore. Because the creator at the center of this story did not just face one scandal or two scandals, but years of accusations that seemed to grow stranger and more disturbing every time his name appeared online.
You guys just can't resist it, can you? There's no limitation to how evil you human beings can be.
Former partners began speaking out about manipulation and emotional. Several young fans later claimed they had been, and a pattern of deeply uncomfortable relationships started to emerge across multiple years of internet history.
Hey. Get the camera off of me, I swear to God.
Leading to some of the most sympathetic comments from onlookers. Eventually, the situation became so serious that a television journalist famous for confronting online predators actually showed up at his front door, turning what was once just internet drama into something that looked much closer to a criminal investigation. And what followed became one of the strangest and most disturbing collapses YouTube has ever seen.
Where I stand on a few issues, if I am the villain or the hero, if I am good or pure.
Before the internet knew him as Onision, he was simply Gregory James Daniel before changing his name to James Jackson. He was born Gregory James Daniel on November 11, 1985, in the state of Washington in the United States. Long before the controversies, long before the viral videos, and long before his name became one of the most polarizing on YouTube, he was just another teenager growing up in the Pacific Northwest. Gregory was raised in a religious household that followed the teachings of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a Protestant Christian denomination known for its strict moral guidelines, emphasis on health, and observance of the Sabbath on Saturdays. According to Gregory's own statements and blog posts, his upbringing was complicated and often unstable. His parents eventually divorced, and he has repeatedly claimed that his father was a predator, an accusation he referenced in several videos over the years while discussing his childhood, like in a 2014 YouTube video titled Facts About Onision. These claims have been presented as part of the explanation for some of the anger and distrust he expressed towards authority figures and relationships later in life. As he moved through his teenage years, Gregory began developing interests that would later shape his online persona. He was drawn to music and creative expression, experimenting with songwriting and digital editing. At the same time, he became fascinated with web design and the early culture of the internet, which in the early 2000s was rapidly becoming a space where young creators could publish their ideas, videos, and opinions without needing traditional media platforms. Message boards, personal websites, and early social media communities were beginning to form the foundation of what would later become modern internet culture, and Gregory spent a lot of time exploring that world. In the late 1990s, when most teenagers were still figuring out how to use a computer, he was already building his own corners of the web. At around 14 years old, he created a personal website called The Cries of the Crypt. The site was one of his earliest attempts to share ideas and interact with people online, something he would continue doing for most of his life. On this website, Gregory used the online alias Otacon, a name inspired by the character from the video game Metal Gear Solid. Like many early internet users, he adopted the name as part of an online identity that was separate from his real life. It allowed him to present himself the way he wanted, and build a small community around the things he believed in. Around this same period, Gregory began developing something much bigger than a website. He started creating his own belief system, something he called Sichesca. This was not just a collection of opinions or personal philosophies. He presented it as a structured explanation for how the world works, an attempt to answer questions about existence, morality, and the purpose of human life. According to writings connected to the ideology, Sichesca was meant to explain reality in a deeper way than traditional belief systems. It framed itself as a path toward understanding the true nature of the universe, something Gregory believed many people simply were not capable of comprehending. In other words, the system positioned itself as knowledge that only certain individuals could fully grasp. The ideology also contained its own terminology and rules, with written explanations about how people should behave and how society should function. In many ways, it resembled the structure of a small personal religion, complete with ideas about truth, purpose, and what Gregory believed humanity should strive toward. What makes this detail even stranger is how early it began. Records tied to the ideology suggest that the foundation of Sichesca dates all the way back to 1997, meaning Gregory would have been only around 12 years old when he first started writing about it. Over time, he continued expanding the system, refining its language, and presenting it as something serious rather than just a teenage thought experiment. On forums he created, he would introduce Sichesca during debates, sometimes pretending to be just another follower who admired the belief system, and other times openly presenting himself as its creator. Despite these efforts, archived discussions suggest that most people on those forums showed little interest in the idea. Around 2005, Gregory also began sharing personal emails on his website that he believed contained important advice or insights. In one of those emails, written to a woman named Margaret, he attempted to persuade her to follow Sichesca, even describing his own personality traits in ways that he suggested made him almost godlike. In the letter, he calls himself a sociopath, a monster, and a god, amongst other things. While he was building these online identities and philosophies, Gregory was also navigating the normal parts of growing up. During high school, he met a girl named Skydan, someone who would eventually become one of the most important people in his early life. Their relationship would go on to play a major role in the years that followed, long before the internet would ever come to know Gregory Daniel as Onision. As Gregory moved into adulthood, his life took a very different direction from the strange online communities he had been building. In 2005, he enlisted in the United States Air Force, beginning what was supposed to be a structured and disciplined chapter of his life. For many people, joining the military represents stability, a clear path forward, and a chance to build a future through service. But Gregory's time in the Air Force would quickly become complicated. During his early training, he entered a survival program known as SERE, which stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. These programs are designed to prepare service members for extreme situations, teaching them how to survive in the wilderness if they ever become isolated behind enemy lines. As part of the training, recruits are sometimes required to and prepare animals for food, a task meant to simulate real survival conditions. At one point during this training, Gregory was asked to kill a rabbit as part of the exercise. According to accounts from the program, he refused to do it. Whether this refusal came from moral discomfort or something else is unclear, but the decision had consequences. Because the exercise was considered an essential part of the training, Gregory was removed from the program and reassigned to a different role. After leaving the survival course, he was retrained and eventually began working as military police. This position placed him in a law enforcement role within the military, responsible for maintaining order and enforcing regulations on base. Not long after, Gregory was stationed overseas at Osan Air Force Base in South Korea. For many service members, overseas assignments can be both exciting and stressful. They involve long periods away from home, unfamiliar environments, and the pressure of adapting to a completely different culture. For Gregory, this period reportedly became extremely difficult. In the months that followed, he began trying to find ways to leave the military entirely. One of the most unusual incidents during this period involved him striking inside his supervisor's office. The act was interpreted as an attempt to force his removal from service, and the event led to disciplinary action within the Air Force. As a result, Gregory was punished and demoted. Eventually, after a series of conflicts and behavioral issues, he was discharged from the military under the status of a conscientious objector, bringing his Air Force career to an abrupt end. With his military chapter closed, Gregory returned to something that had always been familiar to him, the internet. When YouTube launched in 2005, it quickly became clear that the platform offered something far bigger than a personal website. It allowed anyone to upload videos and instantly reach people around the world. Gregory recognized the opportunity early, and soon after the platform began growing, he moved his content there. That decision would eventually change everything. The platform had only just begun to grow, and the idea of becoming famous through online videos was still new. In 2006, Gregory created his own YouTube channel, stepping into what would later become one of the largest entertainment platforms in the world. At the time, the environment on YouTube was very different from what it is today. There were no professional studios, no massive production budgets, and very few rules about what kind of content people could upload. Most creators were simply individuals recording themselves in their bedrooms, experimenting with comedy, music, or commentary. Gregory fit perfectly into this early wave of creators.
My name is Emo Charlie, and I'm going to teach you how to turn yourself into an emo like me.
His first videos followed a simple formula. Many of them were comedic sketches, strange characters, or short videos where he spoke directly to the camera about his opinions on different topics. Some videos were meant to be humorous, while others leaned more into personal commentary, giving viewers a glimpse into his personality and his views on the world. Over the next few years, he continued uploading regularly and slowly built a following. By 2009, his channel had grown to roughly 30,000 subscribers. That number may seem small compared to modern YouTube standards, but at the time it placed him among the more recognizable creators on the platform. Around this period, Gregory also decided to expand his presence by creating a second channel called Speaks. This new channel focused less on sketches and more on direct commentary. Instead of acting out characters or making short comedic bits, he would sit in front of the camera and talk about his opinions on relationships, personal behavior, internet culture, and whatever other topics were on his mind. However, most of those videos have been taken down from his channel. As his channels continued to grow, Gregory also began interacting with other YouTube personalities who were becoming popular around the same time. One of those creators was Shane Dawson, who was quickly becoming one of the biggest names on the platform. When the two collaborated on videos together, the exposure brought Gregory a surge of new viewers.
I was dared and everyone pointed at me to kiss him, so I jumped up like a trooper and I walked over there and I said, "It's okay, Shane. It's okay."
Within just 1 month of collaborating, his subscriber count jumped by roughly 70,000 people. The boost was enormous for the time, pushed his audience to around 120,000 subscribers by the beginning of 2010. By that point, Gregory was no longer just another small YouTuber. He had become a recognizable figure on the platform, someone who could upload content and expect tens of thousands of people to watch it. But his biggest moment was still ahead, and it would come from a video that no one could have predicted would explode across the entire internet. Everything changed with a video that was never meant to be anything serious. At some point in 2009, Gregory uploaded a short strange clip called Banana Song.
Sky!
What, Greg?
I'm a banana!
You're a what?
I'm a banana!
What happened to your clothes?
I'm a banana! I'm a banana! I'm a banana!
The video was simple, almost absurd. Almost immediately, the video exploded. Within a short period of time, the video had gained millions of views. Eventually, it would climb to around 95 million views, making it one of the most recognizable viral videos of that era and his most popular video to date. Popularity of the video pushed Gregory's name far beyond YouTube. At one point, the clip was even featured on the television show Tosh.0, a program that often highlighted strange or funny videos from the internet.
Every video that's ever been sent to us has been awful. This week's submission, like every week, we found. It comes to us from Onision.
That appearance introduced the video to an even wider audience and pushed Gregory further into the spotlight. With that sudden burst of attention, Gregory's online presence began to grow rapidly. More people discovered his other videos, and many of them stayed to see what he would upload next. The viral success of the banana video turned him from a small YouTuber into someone who was suddenly pulling in massive amounts of attention. Over time, the views across all of these channels began adding up quickly. Combined, his videos eventually accumulated more than 350 million views, turning him into one of the most visible personalities in early YouTube culture. But as his popularity increased, so did the controversies surrounding his content. One of the earliest examples came from a series of videos where Gregory repeatedly mocked a young woman who was suffering from a severe eating disorder. Instead of addressing the situation with sympathy, the videos treated the subject as material for criticism and ridicule. Over time, he made more than 20 videos discussing and mocking her appearance, something that many viewers later described as deeply uncomfortable. Around the same period, Gregory also began producing another type of content that would later receive heavy criticism. In these videos, fans would send him pictures of themselves, and he would rate their physical appearance on camera. The concept was presented as a kind of honest evaluation, but the way it was delivered often crossed uncomfortable lines. Some participants in these videos were reportedly underage, which made the situation even more concerning to people looking back at it later. Despite this, many of his fans at the time did not see the videos as a problem. Instead, they viewed Gregory as someone who was simply being brutally honest. His harsh comments and blunt opinions were interpreted as authenticity rather than cruelty, and that perception helped protect his reputation during those early years. For a long time, the audience he had built continued to support him, even as the tone of his content slowly began to shift in ways that would later become much harder to ignore. In 2012, one of the first major controversies surrounding Onision began to attract serious attention online. You see, at the time, his channel was already growing quickly, and he had built a reputation for posting videos where he spoke very bluntly about relationships, morality, and personal behavior. Many of these videos were presented as advice or social commentary, but the way he delivered those opinions often sparked intense reactions from viewers. That year, Onision uploaded a video in which he discussed his views on sexual assault and relationships. During the video, he suggested that women who had many partners could not truly be victims of rape. The video is too inappropriate to share here, but the controversy quickly reached one of the biggest gatherings of online creators at the time, VidCon. VidCon had become a major convention where YouTubers and their audiences could meet, collaborate, and participate in panels about the growing online video industry. However, after the backlash surrounding the video, the organizers decided that Onision would no longer be welcome at the event. As a result, he was banned from attending VidCon, marking one of the earliest public consequences tied to his online behavior. Instead of calming the situation, Onision responded by uploading several now deleted follow-up videos defending his original statements and criticizing the people who were calling him out. This response only fueled more criticism and pushed the controversy further into the spotlight. His personal life was also changing in ways that would later become a major part of his story. While he was still building his online audience, he began communicating with a young Canadian singer named Shiloh. At the time, Shiloh was already known in certain music circles. She had gained attention and online for her emotional songs and had begun building a following of her own. Their first contact reportedly began through email. Shiloh had discovered Gregory's videos online and reached out to him, and the two quickly began talking more frequently. At the time of their first conversations, Shiloh was reportedly only 16 years old, while Gregory was already in his 20s. Despite that age difference, their communication continued to grow more intense. Before long, their conversations moved beyond simple emails. They began speaking on Skype, and according to accounts from that time, these calls were not short or occasional. They sometimes lasted for hours, with the two talking for most of the day. In some cases, they reportedly spent as much as 10 hours at a time on video calls together, developing a connection that became a major part of their daily lives. While this relationship was developing, Gregory's marriage to his first wife, Skyton, was beginning to fall apart. Eventually, the marriage ended in divorce. The timing of that separation overlapped with the growing communication between Gregory and Shiloh, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in his personal life. Not long after the divorce, Gregory arranged to meet Shiloh in person. The meeting took place in Pennsylvania, a location that later raised questions because, according to statements that surfaced later, the choice of that particular state was influenced by its age of consent laws, something that made the situation even more controversial when people began looking back at it. After meeting Gregory, Shiloh eventually left Canada and moved closer to him. In doing so, she also stepped away from parts of her life that had previously defined her career. She distanced herself from her management team and from some of the people who had helped support her music. Over time, her presence in the music industry began to fade, and the career that had once been gaining attention started to slow down significantly. But what made this relationship especially disturbing to many people was not just the circumstances of how it began, but the way certain moments from that period were handled publicly. During one argument between the two, Shiloh reportedly suffered a seizure. Instead of immediately calling for medical help, Gregory began recording the situation on video. The footage showed Shiloh in a confused and disoriented state, struggling to understand what was happening around her. Rather than remaining private, the video was eventually uploaded online for viewers to see. The reaction to the video was mixed at the time. Some found it deeply uncomfortable and alleged he didn't call an ambulance at all. The situation continued to escalate. After another conflict between the two, Gregory contacted the police and reported that Shiloh was threatening to harm herself. The report led to authorities intervening, and Shiloh was eventually admitted to a mental health facility. That intervention created an opportunity for her to reach out to her family, and not long afterwards she returned to Canada, ending the relationship and putting distance between herself and Gregory. As criticism from parts of the YouTube community slowly began to grow, Gregory's personal life continued to move forward in new directions. Not long after his relationship with Shiloh came to an end, another relationship entered the picture, one that would eventually become central to many of the controversies that followed. Gregory later began a relationship with Lainey Jackson. However, this part of the story can be confusing for many people, because the same individual has gone by several different names over the years. At various points, they have been known as Taylor Avero, Lucas Jackson, and Kai Jackson, while online usernames included LaineyBot and later Cool Guy Kai. Because of these changes, discussions about Gregory's life often reference different names when talking about the same person, but this person would later come out as transgender and begin going by the name Kai. Gregory began communicating with a young Kai who was reportedly 17 years old and had been watching his content online. Their connection started the way many creator-fan interactions do, through online conversations that gradually became more frequent and personal. Over time, the relationship deepened and eventually turned romantic. As the years passed, Kai became increasingly present in Gregory's online world. She appeared in his videos, interacted with his audience, and slowly became part of the identity surrounding his channels. Eventually, the two were married in New Mexico, making their relationship official and placing Kai firmly within the public side of Gregory's life. While this relationship was unfolding, Gregory was also expanding his activities beyond YouTube videos. Around this time, he began experimenting with writing, publishing a series of books that reflected many of the same themes and ideas he often discussed in his videos. Two of the most well-known titles were Stones to Abigail and Why I Hate You. These books followed unusual storylines and often blended fiction, with ideas that seemed closely connected to Gregory's own worldview. For some fans, the books were simply another creative outlet from a YouTuber they enjoyed watching. For others, the stories felt like extensions of the same controversial opinions that had already made his online presence divisive. But while Gregory was experimenting with writing and continuing to upload videos, his personal relationships were about to take another unexpected turn. At some point during his marriage to Kai, the couple entered into what was described as a polyamorous relationship with another young woman named Billy Dawn Webb. Billy had initially been a fan of Gregory's content before becoming involved with the couple. The arrangement was presented publicly as a consensual three-person relationship, something Gregory and Kai occasionally spoke about in their videos and online discussions. For a brief period, the situation appeared stable. Billy spent time with the couple, appeared in content, and interacted with their online audience, but the relationship did not last long, before tensions began to surface. Eventually, the arrangement collapsed, and Billy later described the experience very differently.
Lainey wanted to date Billy. That's how this all started. Lainey messaged Billy on Twitter asking if she was interested in girls and how old she was and if she wanted to come see her. And that's how the whole thing started, because Lainey was interested in Billy, and then...
According to her accounts, the relationship involved situations that she felt were humiliating and controlling. Among the claims she made were allegations that Gregory had demanded she do things such as shave her head, or even get tattoos as part of conflicts between them. And by this point, a pattern was becoming harder to ignore. The relationships, the conflicts, the accusations, they were all starting to stack on top of one another, forming a history that many were only beginning to fully examine. His relationships often seemed to follow the same strange path. They began online, usually with fans who admired his work, then gradually moved closer to his personal life. One of the most widely discussed examples of this pattern involved another young fan named Sarah Spear. Just like countless others, Sarah first encountered Gregory's content when she was still very young. She began watching his videos at around 12 years old, at a time when his channels were still attracting large audiences of teenagers and young viewers. Like many fans, she followed his uploads closely and became familiar with both him and Kai through their online presence. Not long after, she began interacting with them directly online. By the time she was 13 years old, she was already communicating with Gregory and Kai through social media and private messages. At first, the conversations appeared friendly and casual, the kind of interactions that sometimes happen between online creators and their fans. But according to Sarah's later statements, the tone of those conversations gradually began to change. Over time, she claimed the discussions became increasingly inappropriate. Messages reportedly began including jokes and comments that crossed personal boundaries, and at one point she alleged that Kai sent explicit images during these exchanges. These interactions continued over the course of several years, building a connection between Sarah and the couple that would eventually become much more complicated. During this same period, Sarah's personal life at home was becoming difficult. According to her account, she was struggling with problems in her family environment and was looking for a way to leave that situation. Gregory and Kai eventually offered her a place to stay with them. What made the situation even more unusual was how it happened. Sarah's mother reportedly agreed to the arrangement and signed documents granting power of attorney to Kai, effectively allowing Sarah to move into their home. With that legal authority in place, Sarah relocated and began living with Gregory and Kai. At the time, the arrangement was presented publicly as an act of kindness, a situation where a struggling teenager had been given a place to stay by people she trusted. But the reality behind the scenes, according to Sarah's later statements, was far more complicated. As rumors and speculation about their relationship began circulating online, Gregory reportedly asked Sarah to appear in a video defending him. In the video, she denied that anything inappropriate had happened between them. Years later, however, Sarah said she had not wanted to make that statement. She claimed she felt pressured to record the video and follow a script that had been given to her. The situation became even more controversial after Sarah turned 18. According to her own account, not long after reaching adulthood, she entered into a relationship with both Gregory and Kai. While the relationship technically began after she was legally an adult, many argued that the years of communication leading up to that point raised serious questions about and manipulation. For a while, these events remained mostly within the background of Gregory's online life. His channels continued uploading content, and his audience remained divided between critics and supporters. But everything changed after these revelations. From Sarah came forward in 2019. Her account seemed to give others the courage to speak as well. In the days and weeks that followed, several more individuals came forward with their own claims about their interactions with Gregory. In total, around 6 additional people publicly shared stories describing troubling behavior that they said had taken place over the years. Each account was different, but many of them described similar patterns involving manipulation, emotional pressure, and relationships that began while they were still very young, with one of them being the Shiloh story we shared earlier. Despite the growing controversies, Gregory's online presence continued generating income. Like many creators during that time, he began using a platform called Patreon. This happened during a period and often referred to as the YouTube adpocalypse, when changes to advertising policies caused many creators to lose significant portions of their revenue. Patreon allowed fans to support creators directly directly through monthly subscriptions, and Gregory quickly took advantage of the system. Supporters who believed in him continued contributing money to his page, helping him maintain a steady income even as criticism around him intensified. At his peak, the combined revenue from YouTube, Patreon, and other online platforms could have brought in close to $1 million per year. For someone who had started as a teenager building strange websites on the early internet, the success was enormous. But the controversies were no longer limited to his relationships or online behavior. Even outside the digital world, problems were beginning to appear. At one point, reports began circulating that he owed a significant amount of money to the Internal Revenue Service, the agency responsible for collecting federal taxes in the United States. While the exact figures were not always clear, the situation suggested that his financial life was becoming increasingly complicated at the same time that his public reputation was collapsing. But the situation was about to attract attention from someone far outside the YouTube world. Around this time, well-known investigative journalist Chris Hansen began looking into the growing number of accusations surrounding Gregory, and his involvement immediately brought far more attention to the situation. These interviews allowed the alleged victims to explain their experiences in long, detailed conversations, and the footage quickly began circulating online. For many viewers who had never paid close attention to the earlier controversies, this was the first time they were hearing the full scope of the allegations. As the investigation continued, Hansen decided to attempt something even more direct. At one point, he traveled to Gregory's home hoping to confront him in person and ask questions about the accusations that had been made. The moment was tense. Hansen approached the house and attempted to initiate a conversation, expecting that Gregory might respond or agree to speak on camera. But the encounter did not unfold the way many people expected. Instead of coming outside to address the questions, Gregory contacted the police and reported that someone was harassing him at his home.
911, what are you reporting?
Hi, there's a person who's been stalking me online, and they just showed up to my house.
Okay, and they're outside now?
Yes, they're knocking on my door.
Okay. And do you know if they have any weapons?
They have a bunch of camera people, like they're YouTube stalkers.
When officers arrived, the situation was framed as an unwanted visitor showing up at his property rather than a journalist attempting an interview. The confrontation ended without any direct discussion between the two. But by that point, the story had already spread across the internet. Videos of the attempted interview, along with the ongoing testimonies from the people Hansen had spoken to, were now reaching millions of viewers. And with every new development, the pressure surrounding Gregory's online career was becoming harder and harder to escape. As the investigation and public scrutiny intensified, the platforms that had once helped Gregory build his career began to distance themselves from him. One of the first major consequences came from Patreon. The ban came after an incident where he allegedly revealed the private phone number of a former partner while trying to defend himself online. The exposure of personal information violated Patreon's policies, and the company responded by banning his account entirely. The loss of that account was significant. Patreon had been one of the main ways he continued earning money, while his reputation on YouTube was already beginning to suffer. Without it, one of his largest sources of support from fans disappeared overnight. Not long after that, another platform followed. The live streaming service Twitch also banned Gregory from using its platform. But the most damaging decision came from the platform where his entire career had been built. In January of 2021, YouTube announced that all of Gregory's channels would be demonetized. This meant that advertisements would no longer run on his videos, effectively cutting off the primary revenue stream that had supported his content for years. Even though his videos could technically remain online, they would no longer generate the kind of income they once had. For someone who had built an entire career around the platform, the decision was devastating. Yet even as these consequences mounted, Gregory continued trying to control the narrative surrounding him. Instead of stepping away from the internet entirely, he remained active online and continued addressing the accusations in his own way. In many of his responses, he denied the allegations outright. He often framed the situation as a coordinated attack against him, arguing that the stories circulating online were either misunderstandings or deliberate attempts to damage his reputation. At other times, his responses took a more theatrical approach. He uploaded videos showing exaggerated emotional breakdowns, screaming, crying, or acting in ways that left viewers unsure whether the behavior was genuine or performed for attention.
So apparently you guys don't understand the concept of leaving someone alone when they ask to be left alone, and you think that because you think something of me, that justifies literally anything that you want to do. Like, dislike, I don't know, every video I put out to a ridiculous extent. Like, seriously, I think my last video got like 98% dislikes. Really? Really? You know what? What is the point? What is the point of even trying anymore when you people are still Oh my god! Why do you do this?
These videos spread quickly across the internet, often becoming memes or viral clips themselves. At the same time, he also took action against people who criticized him on YouTube. Numerous commentary creators reported receiving copyright claims on videos where they discussed his behavior. These claims often resulted in the videos being temporarily removed or losing the ability to generate revenue. Some individuals even reported receiving threats of legal action simply for discussing Gregory's behavior in their videos. Whether those lawsuits would ever actually happen was unclear, but the possibility alone was enough to intimidate some creators. Despite all these efforts to defend himself and push back against critics, the situation around Gregory had already reached a point where controlling the narrative was becoming almost impossible. Over time, he became widely known as one of the most disliked personalities in YouTube's history. Due to all this, around 2022, his online activity slowed down significantly, and for a while it seemed as though he had finally stepped away from the platforms that had once defined his life, but that absence did not last long. In November 2023, Gregory returned with a new project. He released a self-produced documentary where he attempted to defend himself against the accusations that had followed him for years. Rather than apologizing or retreating quietly, the documentary suggested that he still believed he had been misunderstood, and that much of the criticism surrounding him had been exaggerated or unfair. Not long after that return, Gregory began experimenting with a new platform that had grown massively while he was away from the spotlight. He started posting content on TikTok, creating accounts under names such as Onision.com and Onision Speaks. But the comeback did not unfold the way he may have expected. His TikTok accounts gathered only a small number of followers, reaching only a few thousand people. Compared to the millions of viewers he once had on YouTube, the difference is enormous. The content he uploaded also felt strangely out of place on the modern internet. At the same time, the legal situation surrounding Gregory had not disappeared. Sarah Spear, the woman whose story had helped bring widespread attention to the allegations against him, eventually filed a lawsuit connected to the events she described. Outside of social media platforms, Gregory also continued operating his own websites. Two of the main ones were Onision.com and another site known as Only.r. These websites served as spaces where he could post content without relying on the platforms that had already distanced themselves from him. Gregory also used these websites as a place to continue publishing his creative work. Through them, he released writing projects including books and comics, as well as personal blog posts where he spoke directly to readers. Even after losing much of the audience that once made him famous, he still seemed determined to keep telling his version of the story. Regardless of what the future holds for this guy, what is clear is that the story of Onision has become one of the most complicated and controversial histories the YouTube platform has ever produced.